Welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Madeline Lombardi. There are tough times ahead for many West Australians as we are set to bear the burden of the eastern states' 50% electricity price hike. Despite the fact that our utility grids are not linked with other states, additional costs will be added to manufactured goods imported from interstate, forcing WA consumers to pay more before the grim warning of double-digit inflation. Here is veteran political journalist and analyst Peter Kennedy with his observation.
When Jim Chalmers announced the projected energy price increases for the East Coast on Tuesday night, the feeling was, well, bad luck for East Coast consumers, bad luck for East Coast households, and that Western Australians wouldn't be affected by that because of the smart decisions by previous state governments. But the sad reality is that because most of the manufactured goods that we use in the West are imported from the East, and the effect of those power prices will be felt on the price of those manufactured goods that come from the East, West Australians are going to be paying those higher prices just as the same as those on the East Coast. We're not immune. We're not immune from the bungled decisions that governments in the East have made over the past few years. Selling off power stations, restricting coal production, restricting gas production, and not having a gas reservation policy in the East. So their bungles will be not confined to the East Coast. West Australians will have to pay for them. Jim Chalmers in his budget predicted that inflation would hit the sevens, and he believed that that would be the peak and that inflation would start to come down. However, the impact of these increased power prices is going to have another impact on inflation as well. Let's hope his prediction on inflation is correct, but there's also the possibility that the inflation figures could have been very modest. And don't rule out the possibility that the inflation rate could hit somewhere close to 10% over the next couple of years. Something Australia hasn't seen for a very long time, but given the circumstances, given the high power prices and the problems particularly in the East, the supply lines particularly in the East, 10% could be a real possibility. It's going to be a tough couple of years. Inflation heading up, real wages not matching inflation, and households are going to do it tough. So, and it's not just on the East Coast. The West Coast, the state government has helped cushion the impact of inflation and higher power prices on West Australians. I suppose the question is, how long can they continue to do that? But the real point, West Australians are not immune from these very high power price increases that have been forecast for the East.
And now, here is AMAWA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly COVID-19 update and medical commentary.
Hi, I'm just back from New Zealand after a couple of weeks of enjoying being over there. Very interesting travelling for the first time overseas since 2019. And the thing that dismays me is that most people have given up on trying to prevent themselves from getting infected when they travel and just accepting infection. And we know that with every infection, whether you're vaccinated or not, there is a risk of getting severe complications and long-term COVID. Now, it may not happen the first time or the second time or the third time you get infected, but people seem to be resigning themselves to being infected a couple of times a year for the next decade, and that is just not an acceptable way to look after your long-term health, and we would not recommend that any more than we would smoking. So when I get on a plane and I'm one in 100 people wearing a proper mask to get on the plane, I don't see why people just can't take these simple protections to look after themselves at this stage. And it's a failure of government messaging. It's a failure of political messaging where they've been saying that this is all over, we've solved the problem. And unfortunately, the people who are going to be doing the suffering are the ones who are buying that hook, line and sinker at the moment, it seems. So I was able to travel for 2 weeks and really enjoy myself. I went to the meetings that I needed to go to and wore a mask when I was in crowded indoor locations. I still went to restaurants and chose well-ventilated ones or chose to sit outside where that wasn't possible, and enjoyed a lot of what New Zealand has to offer, which is obviously also in the outdoors. And because of that, masking and being a bit careful, particularly when there are people around who were all crowded into closed spaces, I managed to avoid catching anything the whole time I was away, despite there still being pretty high rates of these Omicron derivative viruses circulating through the population at the moment. So it is swimming a little bit against the tide at the moment to look after yourself. But my message is you don't have to miss out on things. You don't have to miss out on catching up on people, on having conversations, on having a coffee with them, on having a meal with them face to face. And that those human connections really are important, and it really is a good thing to rekindle them for those people who have been avoiding it all. But it's possible to do it in a safe way and a sensible way, and we should be supporting particularly our elderly, particularly our very young who are not vaccinated. But this disease can strike at anybody. So for those of you who have been looking after yourselves, good on you. Remain vigilant. For those who've got a bit slack lately, it's not that hard to pull the mask on when you're getting on a bus and take it off again as soon as you step out. And it may be you that has an asymptomatic infection one day and everybody else around you that you're protecting by not spreading that unnecessarily. So the message that the government should be getting out there, they're not. Well, we'll try and keep plugging away at that. Thanks very much for your time.
That was Dr. Andrew Miller. And now a brief weather update. Cold temperatures are set to make WA shiver with a minimum of 8 degrees on Monday and Tuesday night. On Thursday, we'll hit a maximum of 31 degrees at daytime, drop to 13 at night before we'll hit a maximum of 26 degrees on Friday with a nighttime low of 15 degrees, plus a 30% chance of rain. The advice from me is don't pack away your jackets just yet. And that's Western Perspective. This week we'll be back again next Sunday. Until then, Ivan and Melly, it's back to you.
That's some good advice. Thanks, Maddie. And right now, here's Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. Making news on 6 News. More rallies set to be held to honour 15-year-old Cassius Turvey after his alleged murder while walking home from school with a group of friends in Perth. D-Day for one minor party in Victoria as another has to resort to endorsing independent candidates. And it's Halloween tomorrow, but what about all those ghosts from back in May? Questions put to an our Liberal candidate about what he might know about the other Kooyong Independent. You can see full details on those stories and plenty more by heading to our YouTube channel. Search 6 News AU to find us, or head to our website, 6newsau.com. For now, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo. And that's our weekly news and current affairs, with the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. Full details on wamnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly and myself, we wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.